The kingdom of Velareth was a place where twilight always lingered too long. The sun hung low as if afraid to rise fully above the ancient towers. Tonight, those towers shimmered with banners of silver and blue, fluttering in the soft wind like restless ghosts. The entire city was alive with sound, laughter, horns, the low hum of strings, all in celebration of a single man, Prince Auric of Velareth, heir to the throne. The people called it the Feast of Stars, the grand ceremony marking the prince's passage from youth into the full rights of power. But beneath the joy, beneath the shining lamps and flowing wine, there were whispers, whispers that not even the music could drown. Among the gathered nobles stood Elias, a young man dressed not in velvet or gold, but in a scholar's black. He was the prince's closest friend, though few remembered how that friendship began. Some said he was a foundling from the ruins beyond the eastern mountains. Others said he was born of no family at all. Whatever the truth, Elias had risen in the royal court through intellect, loyalty, and a quiet kind of grace that drew the queen's attention long ago. As the feast continued, Auric laughed among his knights, raising his goblet again and again. He was tall, proud, and bright-eyed, the kind of man born to be loved by his people. But Elias's gaze wandered past him, toward the far end of the hall, where Queen Seraphine sat beneath the canopy of stars. Seraphine was a vision of calm majesty. Her hair shimmered like midnight silk, and her eyes seemed to hold centuries of quiet storms. Though her face bore no sign of age, her expression carried the weight of someone who had lived far too long. Rumors said she never slept. Some swore they had seen her standing on the palace balcony long after midnight, staring at the moon as if waiting for someone who never came. As Elias watched her, a strange ache stirred within him, not of love, but of recognition. He had felt it once before, years ago, when he first touched the old runes buried in the royal library, words that spoke of gods and chains, of immortality bought with sorrow. That same cold whisper brushed against his thoughts now. The music shifted. Dancers filled the floor. Auric turned, smiling. "Come, Elias," he called. "Even scholars must celebrate tonight." Elias smiled faintly but shook his head. "I celebrate in silence, my prince." "Still the quiet one," Auric teased. "You'll turn to dust before you learn to dance." But his tone softened with affection. There was a brotherly warmth in his voice, a trust built through years of shared dreams. Elias felt it keenly, and yet beneath that warmth, he sensed something else. A shadow that had nothing to do with jealousy, but everything to do with fate. As the night deepened, servants moved through the hall carrying trays of shining fruit and golden wine. Torches flickered along the carved pillars, throwing long shadows that danced across painted walls, scenes of ancient wars, gods, and crowned figures kneeling before stars. The queen rose. Her movement silenced the room. Even the music seemed to bow before her presence. "My son," she said softly, her voice carrying without effort. "Velareth stands on the edge of a new dawn. The gods who watched over us once are silent now, but I believe the stars still listen. Tonight you step into their light." Auric knelt before her, his head bowed. Seraphine touched his hair with a trembling hand. There was love in her gesture, but also fear, as though she touched something already half lost. Elias watched from afar, feeling something twist in his chest, something he couldn't name. Then, as Seraphine turned from her son, her gaze swept across the hall and met Elias's eyes. It lasted no more than a heartbeat. Yet in that heartbeat, Elias felt the air leave the room. The candles dimmed. The music faded. There was only that gaze, ancient, knowing, filled with a sorrow too deep for words. When she looked away, a faint shimmer caught his eye. Something small slipped from her hand as she passed near him, folded parchment, sealed with her ring's dark blue wax. He glanced around. No one seemed to notice. Slowly he bent to retrieve it. The seal was broken easily, as if meant to be opened by him alone. Inside, in graceful silver ink, were 6 simple words. "Come find me tonight." "S." The note burned faintly against his skin as though alive. He folded it quickly, hiding it within his sleeve. A voice behind him startled him. "Elias, are you unwell?" It was Arik again, smiling but concerned. "You look as though you've seen a ghost." "Perhaps I have," Elias murmured. The prince laughed. "Then drink more wine. Ghosts fade faster that way." But Elias barely heard him. His thoughts were already elsewhere, tangled between reason and an unexplainable pull that urged him toward the queen's words. When the feast finally ended, the palace bells tolled midnight. The guests departed with laughter still echoing through the halls. Servants cleared the tables. The fires dimmed. Arik retired to his chambers, still humming an old song from their childhood. Elias lingered. The moonlight crept through the stained windows, painting the marble floors with soft silver light. Somewhere deep within the palace, a door creaked. A whisper echoed, faint but unmistakable. He followed it. The corridors of the royal palace were older than the kingdom itself. Some said they were built atop the ruins of the gods. Elias's footsteps echoed softly as he passed portraits of long-dead monarchs, their painted eyes seeming to follow him. At last, he reached a long spiral staircase leading upward, toward the Queen's Tower. The air grew colder. The walls seemed to hum faintly with unseen power. At the top, the door stood slightly open. Candlelight flickered within. He paused. Every rational thought screamed at him to turn back. But the note in his sleeve felt heavier with every breath, as if pulling him forward. He stepped inside. The chamber was unlike any he had seen. Shelves of ancient scrolls lined the walls. Strange symbols glowed faintly in the stone. At the center stood a tall mirror, but it did not reflect his image. Instead, it shimmered with scenes of another world, a storm of light and shadow swirling beyond the glass. And before that mirror stood Queen Seraphine. She was not dressed as a monarch now, but in a simple dark gown, her hair unbound, falling like a river of night down her back. The air around her shimmered faintly, not from heat, but from something older. "Something divine? You came," she said, her voice soft but steady. Elias bowed his head. "Your Majesty asked me to." "I did," she replied, turning toward him. Her eyes glowed faintly, not with magic, but with deep sorrow. "Because there are truths that must be spoken before dawn. Truths that cannot live in the daylight." She gestured toward the mirror. "Tell me, Elias, what do you see?" He looked into the swirling surface. Shapes formed. A crown, a battlefield, a woman standing alone beneath a sky of broken stars. Her face was hers, and yet not hers. Her hand reached out, trembling. "I see." He hesitated. "I see grief, and power, and a curse that never ends." Seraphine closed her eyes. "Then you understand more than most." When she opened them again, a tear glimmered like a shard of moonlight. "There is something you must know," she whispered. "The blood that flows in you, and it is not mortal. You were brought here by fate, not chance. And tonight, your destiny will begin." Elias felt the world tilt around him. "What do you mean?" She took a step closer, her expression caught between hope and fear. "You carry the spark that can break what binds me. But if you fail, it will bind you instead." The candles flickered violently, their flames bending toward the mirror. The storm inside it grew stronger, its light swallowing the room. Elias tried to speak, but the sound was lost in the rising wind. The mirror pulsed once, twice, then shattered into 1,000 shards that hung in the air like frozen rain. In each fragment, he saw a reflection of himself, crowned in fire. Seraphine's voice trembled as she whispered, "The gods are waking, and they have already chosen you."
The shards of the mirror hung in the air like frozen stars. Elias stood motionless, breath shallow, as if afraid one movement would shatter the moment completely. The mirror had broken, yet its pieces did not fall. They floated, glowing faintly in the dim light, each reflecting a different image, fragments of worlds, lives, and memories that were not his own. At the center of it all stood Queen Seraphine, her hand still outstretched toward him. The air hummed with invisible energy, pressing against his chest like a living heartbeat. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of ages. Now you see it, she said. The truth the gods buried in silence. Elias took a slow step forward. What truth? That this throne, she said, gesturing toward the room in the storm of light, was never built for mortals. It was a chain, a prison made to hold something divine. The first queen of Velerith was no woman of flesh. She was born of starlight, and when she defied her makers, they bound her spirit into this line of rulers. I am her echo, her shadow, carrying the same curse through every century. Elias felt the words strike deep. Then the stories of your agelessness, they are true. Yes, she whispered. But it is not immortality. It is captivity. The shards around them trembled as if responding to her pain. Some flickered with scenes of battles long past. Kings dying, cities burning, and always a woman standing in the middle, her eyes filled with grief. Elias's mind swirled with questions. Why tell me this? Why now? Because the curse is growing weaker, Seraphine said. And when it breaks, the gods will return to claim what is theirs. The world will not survive their anger. Her gaze turned to him sharp and searching. But I felt something the night you first entered this palace. You carry a light that has not existed here for centuries. The same divine spark that once defied them. You may be able to break the cycle. Elias shook his head slowly. I am no god. A faint smile touched her lips. No, you are something rarer, a mortal with the heart of one. The room fell silent. The only sound was the low hum of power echoing between the floating shards. The mirror fragments began to drift toward one another, forming a slow spiral of light. In that light, Elias saw himself, but older, crowned, standing beside Seraphine beneath a sky of broken stars. The image faded as quickly as it appeared. Elias swallowed hard. What must I do? Seraphine's eyes darkened. To unbind the curse, one must confront the source. The gods hid it in the Book of Silent Stars, an artifact sealed in the deepest vault beneath this palace. But to reach it, we must cross the mirror halls, a place where the past still walks and truth takes form. Her tone grew distant, almost reverent. It is not a journey of distance, Elias. It is a descent into memory. He hesitated, glancing again at the shards. And what will happen to you if the curse is broken? She turned away, her face half in shadow. If it breaks, my soul will be freed. But freedom and life are not the same. The meaning hit him slowly. You will die, she gave a small nod. Every crown demands a sacrifice. For a long time, neither spoke. The candlelight flickered across her pale features, softening them until she looked almost human, almost fragile. Elias wanted to argue, to tell her that there must be another way. But deep down he knew the truth of her words. Curses were never kind. They ended as they began, in loss. Finally, she said quietly, there is something I must show you. She crossed the room to a locked chest carved with old runes. With a whispered word, the locks opened on their own. Inside lay a silver circlet, dull with age and engraved with symbols that shimmered faintly when touched by the candlelight. This was the crown of the first queen, she said, lifting it with care. It holds what remains of the divine spark, the memory of rebellion, but it also holds the power to destroy. Elias felt the pull of it immediately, a hum that resonated in his very blood. It was as if the crown recognized him. The gods' chains are made of oaths, Seraphine continued. To break them, we must speak a vow stronger than theirs. What kind of vow? He asked. One born of truth, she said simply, and of choice. That is the one power even the gods fear. She placed the crown back into the chest and closed it softly. Tomorrow, when the moon reaches its highest point, meet me in the Hall of Stars. There we begin. Elias wanted to ask more, to understand what she was risking, and why she trusted him. But before he could speak, the floating shards of the mirror began to descend, settling to the ground one by one, until the last piece fell, and the light faded. When he blinked, the chamber was dark. The power was gone, and the queen stood quietly by the window, looking out at the distant horizon where dawn was beginning to touch the edge of the sky. You should rest, she said. What comes next will test more than your strength. Elias bowed his head, uncertain. Do you trust me? Seraphine looked over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. I do not trust easily. But I believe in signs, and you, Elias, are one. That night, Elias returned to his quarters but found no rest. Sleep came and went like waves, broken by visions of fire and stars. He saw the queen standing beneath a falling sky, her hand reaching for him, her face both ageless and ancient. And somewhere beyond the dream, a voice whispered the same words again and again. The one who breaks her chain must love her enough to wear it. He woke before dawn, breathless, the words echoing like a curse. Morning came gray and heavy. The palace, usually bright with gold and laughter, felt strangely silent. The courtiers whispered of omens, of cracks in the sky, of birds flying in circles over the towers. Even Prince Arik seemed uneasy. When Elias found him in the training yard, Arik greeted him warmly, though his eyes searched Elias's face with quiet suspicion. "You vanished early last night," Arik said. "Even my mother noticed." Elias hesitated. "I needed air." "Air from what?" "Celebration?" Arik smiled, but there was a tension beneath it. "You've been distant lately. Is something troubling you?" Elias wanted to tell him everything, but the truth was too heavy. The curse, the gods, the queen's secret, none of it would sound real. "I'm fine," Elias said finally. "Just tired." Arik studied him a moment longer, then laughed softly. "You always were terrible at lying." He clapped Elias on the shoulder and turned back to his soldiers. But even as he left, Elias could feel his friend's uncertainty. The bond between them, once simple and strong, now carried a shadow neither could name. That evening, as the moon rose high and cold, Elias made his way to the Hall of Stars, a vast chamber beneath the palace built of white stone veined with silver. The ceiling shimmered like the night sky itself, each glowing point a real fragment of crystal drawn from fallen meteors. Seraphine was already there, standing before a great circular door engraved with countless runes. In her hands she held a lantern that glowed with quiet blue light. "You came," she said softly. "You asked." He replied. She gave a small smile. "Few ever do." She turned toward the door. "This gate opens only for those who carry divine blood. Place your hand upon it." Elias hesitated, then pressed his palm against the cold stone. The runes flared to life, burning bright blue. The ground trembled. Slowly, the door opened inward, revealing a stairway spiraling into endless darkness. "The mirror halls," Seraphine said. "Once you step through, there is no going back." Elias looked into the dark and then back at her. "If this curse destroys you, what will happen to the kingdom?" Her eyes softened. "Then perhaps it will finally know peace." He wanted to argue, but her calm left no space for doubt. So he nodded once and stepped forward into the shadows. Seraphine followed, her lantern casting ripples of pale light on the stone. As they descended, whispers filled the air, faint echoes of laughter, sorrow, and battle. The walls themselves seemed alive, reflecting fragments of memory. In one reflection, Elias saw himself as a boy, lost and alone. In another, he saw Seraphine in armor, standing among ruins centuries ago. The deeper they went, the stronger the voices became. It felt as though the past itself was watching them. At last, they reached a wide chamber. In its center stood a pool of still water, perfectly reflecting the stars above. Seraphine knelt beside it, placing her lantern down. "This is where the path divides," she said quietly. "Here we must each face what binds us most." Elias frowned. "And if we fail?" She met his gaze. "Then the curse wins." Before he could respond, the water rippled, and a reflection rose from its surface. A shadow version of himself, eyes filled with the same fire he had seen in the mirror before. It smiled, his own smile, and spoke in a voice that was both his and not his. "You cannot save her," it said. "You will become her curse." The chamber trembled, and Seraphine's lantern flickered. Elias took a step back, heart pounding, as his reflection reached out of the water toward him. Hook for part 3. The queen's voice cut through the chaos, sharp, commanding. "Do not fear what you see, Elias. It is only truth made flesh." But as the reflection's hand touched his, the world shattered into light, and he felt himself falling through time,